Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we are here with a Jarvan complete guide. Now surprisingly, I've been playing a lot of Jarvan personally and he's one of my go-to junglers, but I've never actually made a Jarvan guide. Now of course we all get autofilled to the jungle quite a bit, so you're inevitably gonna have to play some junglers and Jarvan is that jungler for me. So if you look up at the cards now, you will see Jarvan's basic guide up in the cards right now for his skills, leveling, auto tips and tricks, as well as some combos. Now I just did that video like 2 days ago, so check that out if you haven't, just for a brief guide on Jarvan before we jump into the items, rune spells, and then the gameplay after that. So let's get into it, right? So personally, I think the best way to play Jarvan is to build him full tank. Now, why do I think that? I'm going to talk more about that in the gameplay later on, but let's just go through the build first. So despite going for basically full tank, your only kind of non-tank item is Triforce, which is more of a fighter item. Gives you health, which does make you tankier, but also a little bit of attack speed, ability haste, and AD, just to help you dish out a little bit more damage. And then you also get the Spellblade passive, which of course helps you out with damage as well. Also giving you movement speed from the Fervor and the Valor passives. And then after they're going to go into defensive boots. Now this is either going to be Merc Treads or it's going to be plated steel caps, either or depending on the enemy's team composition. I think in most games it's going to be steel caps though. And then you're going to build into gargoyles, of course, being a very OP enchant if you're building health. So next up you want to go for tank items. And these are the 4 general tank items that I go for, and I only really change them in couple situations. So I'm going to go over them first, and then I'm gonna go over the variations, right? So first off, we have Zeke's Convergence, Armor, Mana, Health, and when you ult, it's gonna form a Blizzard, which is gonna slow down enemies and speed up allies, which helps your team follow up your engage. Right, then you have Twin Guard, gives you double resistances, as well as just boosting the resistances that you already have. And then here you have Force of Nature, which is, in my opinion, the best magic resist item. Of course, gives you health, magic resist, as well as giving you the stacking magic resist up to the point where you reduce all incoming magic damage by 25%, which is the main reason why I think this item is the best magic resist item out of the 3. And then you have Frozen Heart, which mainly serves to reduce enemies' attack speeds. So let's go over the variations. So firstly, if there's a lot of attack speed champions, I like to go for Frozen Heart earlier, and then I will go for other items later on. Now secondly, here you can see we have Bramble Vest here, but we don't have Thornmail. Now I don't like Thornmail as an item, but in some games you have to go Bramble Vest just to get some anti-heal, like especially if there's like a Soraka or a Nami. I'm not Nami, a Soraka or a Yumi. I mean, champions like that have a lot of healing, maybe like even an Aatrox, or just champions that heal a lot, you kind of need a Bramble Vest, right? So the other situation you might find yourself in is if there is no AP on the enemy team. So in that case, you wouldn't actually need Force of Nature. You could then go for something else like a Randuin's Omen, because just simply due to the fact that they have no AP probably means they have a couple of crit champions. Or you could just go for some other defensive item, which it's kind of up to you, right? There's a lot of choices here. Right, and then of course the other case is you're playing into like a full AP or heavy AP team, of course, in which case you can probably swap out the Frozen Heart for like a Canik Rukern or even a Spirit Visage, depending on which one you prefer. So with that, let's now talk about the runes, right? So the runes, despite building tank, you want to actually go for Conqueror because you still do a decent amount of damage. You don't want to go for Aftershock to make yourself more tanky. You want to generally go for Conqueror, and basically everyone is using the same rune loadout as myself. So with Conqueror, you will get stacking AD as well as giving yourself Omnivamp. And then, of course, you want to go for Resolve. So Courage of the Colossus, going to give you a shield when you CC people, which should be very often. Second Wind just for a little bit of sustain in the fights. And then you have Perseverance to give yourself tenacity, as well as giving yourself more resistances when you get CC'd. And finally, you have Sudden Impact, which, since you basically always start off with EQ, you're going to get that dash in and you're going to proc the Sudden Impact just for a little bit of extra damage. Now, of course, with the spells, goes without saying, is going to be Flash and Smite. Now, with all that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay itself. Okay, so now jumping into the gameplay itself, of course, as usual, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Any questions, queries, or remarks, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Of course, I will be sure to address them. So starting off, nowadays the most common jungle clear is to control ward the red buff and then start on the blue buff. This is because by the end of your clear, you will have red buff, and then you have it for a longer duration when you gank, because normally the standard play for jungle is you full clear into Skull or into gank. So before I talk too much about Jarvan, I know there's going to be action at the beginning, so let's hold off on the Jarvan discussion and get into it. So here, you see Akali has walked in here, so I put down the flag, and then I just start whacking her, right? So the flag itself didn't actually hit, it doesn't actually do very much damage, but it gives me the 25% extra attack speed on level 1 to start whacking her, right? So Set tries to flash E but kind of fails. Now it's a 2v2, about to become a 3v2, about to become a 3v3. Eventually, both myself and Master Yi flash away. Now, unfortunately, I become the first blood because they both flash after me, whereas no one flashed for Master Yi. Master Yi actually escapes, but the fight continues with Morgana picking up the trade kill onto the Akali, and then the Volibear now running forward and going for the kill on Set, which he does get. So overall, still a negative trade. Now I've respawned and I'm coming back to the fight to whack Volibear. Volibear with the healing makes it a little bit difficult for me to kill him. Of course, he doesn't have flash from earlier, flashing after me. Eventually, I get the kill on him, and in the end, it's a 2-for-2 trade. However, something to note is that Master Yi has been clearing his jungle while I was doing nothing, or rather while I was fighting, I should say, not doing nothing, but while I was fighting he was clearing his jungle, so I will be very far behind in terms of jungle clear, which is a very unique situation because very rarely in Wild Rift are there level 1 fights in the jungle. Normally it's very standard, both junglers full clear and then they gank and things like that, so it's a pretty atypical start to the match, but you know these things happen sometimes and you gotta adapt accordingly. So the game plan is still the same, right? It's still basically full clear the jungle and then go for a gank or go for the skull. If we can't get the skull, it's fine. I think skull has been nerfed to a point where, and when I say nerfed, I mean like nerfed like ages ago, months ago. Like it's been nerfed to a point where if you lose the skull, it's really not that bad. If you get the skull, it's a nice thing to have because it will get you level 5 when you get the skull. Although in this case with the kill that I got, I should be getting level 5 anyway, so it shouldn't really be too big of an issue. So here, ideally, when you play jungle, one of the things you want to look at, especially as a ganking jungler like Jarvan, like you guys see me play a lot of Greys, a lot of Nila, you know, these kind of champions who are basically just farming junglers, but I haven't really talked so much about ganking junglers. Right, so with ganking junglers, you want to evaluate the matchups and you want to kind of see which lanes you kind of want to gank, right? So if you take a look, you have Set versus Volibear, right? This is like a classic fighter v fighter matchup in the top lane. It's not the easiest, you know, to gank because it's going to take a long time to kill someone tanky like Volibear, and of course you do have, you know, the Set as well, who's pretty tanky as well, does a decent amount of damage, but not the best lane to gank. Then you have the mid lane matchup, which is Morgana versus the Akali, right? So Morgana provides a lot of CC if she can hit the binding and the ult, right? As you guys can see here, we are kind of trying to do that, trying to gank here because we are trying to go in on her. However, you can see that we are gonna die to the tower, and Morgana ends up dying to the tower as well, so not very good, which is gonna lead into my point, right? Which is Akali, not very easy to gank because she's very mobile, right? She has a lot of mobility, she has a lot of tools like the shroud that you just saw there to kind of prevent you from really ganking her very well. So she's one of the champions that's really hard to gank, and especially with Morgana not having the most damage, it's not very easy to gank, right? So ideally the most gankable lane is actually Samira and Thresh, right? Because the moment you engage on them, there's not a lot they can do. Yes, Thresh can peel, but Samira is pretty easy to kill, and with a Caitlyn Senna, they should generally be winning the matchup because Samira Thresh doesn't have a lot of pressure, and Caitlyn Senna can kind of bully them if the situation goes well. However, as you can see here, based on the fact that my Caitlyn just died, the situation is not going well. So in the loading screen, you kind of want to evaluate which is the lane you want to gank and what is likely to happen. Now, of course, what's likely to happen is not what's always going to happen, because what's likely to happen here is that Caitlyn and Senna bully them under tower and then we can dive them. But what's actually happening is Thresh and Samira are somehow killing my Caitlyn and my Senna, and you know, it's just sometimes like the expected thing doesn't happen because the players are just not playing the matchups correctly, or you know, something just goes wrong, there's a freak accident in the lane, and you know, some weird thing happens, you know, like that. Here Master Yi's trying to invade my jungle. I'm gonna go in on him, popping the ulti, reducing his damage here. I'm just whacking him, full stack conquer at this point. I'm waiting for my team to come. Senna finally comes over, but in this case, we cannot really chase him any further. So we did get his flash though, which is a pretty important tool for him, although he did steal a couple of chickens. Right, so currently, if you take a look at the goal situation, I'm pretty much the most goal on my team somehow, and Akali is now coming in, trying to harass me, trying to get a kill on me. Hits the shuriken onto a minion. I flash under the tower. I'm trying to survive there. She ignites me, but I pop the W, and the W shield actually eats the majority of the ignite damage. One of the few times I actually think the W shield is very handy. Majority of the time, W shield is kind of just meh, right? But this case, it eats the entire ignite damage, actually saves my life, and I survive, and Akali ends up dying with a little botch dive. So kind of a botch dive for a botch dive, with us initially diving the Akali and dying, and now she dives us and she dies instead. Kind of evens out things a little bit. Right, so now let's talk about Jarvan's builds, right? So you will notice that I go for the basically almost full tank build except for Triforce. And there are two other ways you can build him, right? Which is Fighter. So when I say Fighter, I mean as we knock up Master Yi here and he's now tanking tower, he tries to go for a gank that doesn't work out. We're now just going to go back to farming the jungle. So very important when you're playing jungle to pay attention to these kind of things, going for counter ganks and things like that. So here Volibear super overextended, we're trying to help out our Set. EQ over the wall, Set pulls him away from our EQ, which is not very great, but eventually we are able to help him get the kill. Akali now goes in on me, pretty much almost one-shots me. Thankfully my EQ comes back up so I can actually dash away and remain alive. So as I was alluding to earlier, he has two other builds you can go for. So you have full tank, you have fighter. Fighter is going for things like Sundered Sky, Death's Dance, and Starrick's Gauge. So the items that are still kind of semi-tanky, but at the same time deal more damage than full tank items, right? So the fighter items. And then of course you have Lethality, which is just full on just Dust Blade, Ghost Blade, Serpent's Fang, items like these. As the enemy team takes the dragon, and we're gonna go for the hero, right? So Master Yi is kind of over the wall, a little bit scary. We're using the flag for a little bit of vision. Volibear ults in. Here I'm gonna do the ult, and then dash out of the ult trick that I covered in my basic guide, which it allows me to basically escape by trapping the enemies inside of my ult and allowing me to just run away. Using the Herald Recall, going back and getting my boots. Now, unfortunately, my team kind of dies for the Herald, although I don't die, but they die instead, which is not the most ideal. Right, so now, a lot of actions happening. When you're the jungler, generally you are where the action is because you are the one that forces the action. Of course, people fight in lane, but when you gank and things like that, that's where the action happens, right? So you kind of force the action majority of the time, right? So a lot of pretty action-packed games so far, especially being a early game kind of a ganking jungle-focused champion. So the reason why I like to go for a full tank is because I feel that with full tank, you not only can tank for your team, but you can get off multiple rotations of your spells, right? So after you EQ ult in initially and you start tanking, you can get off another ult, not another ult, you can get off another like 1 or 2 combos a lot of the time. As here we're setting up for a dive, which is what we wanted to do all along. Samira gets rooted by Morgana, gets CC'd, boom, we almost one-shot her, she flashes away, dies eventually. Now I'm tanking tower against the Thresh, my team should be able to finish it off easily. I'm now walking away. Master Yi coming in for my team. I'm gonna go back over the wall and see if I can go ahead and help my team. However, with Akali coming down and Master Yi free hitting onto the 2 squishy ADC champions, Master Yi picks up an easy triple kill, and there's not a lot I can do. So here I see Set TP, so I'm still hovering in the bush. I'm not sure where Akali is because she was here just now, so I'm using the sweeper to check if Akali is still nearby. If she is, probably is not a good fight. Samira now coming back as well. Master Yi is on the tower, so not a lot we can do. Go back to farming the jungle. So once again, the build discussion is a little bit interrupted, and it's interrupted again as Akali now basically goes all in onto us and one-shots us. Not much we can do anymore. However, this does give us time to discuss the builds, right? Because now we're off the map, now we're dead. So I like to go for full tank, as I said, because you can get off multiple rotations of your spells, especially your EQs. Of course, you can get off maybe 2 to 3 rotations, especially with gargoyles before you die. So a lot of extra utility for the team. Comparing that to the fighter build, you do more damage, but you die a little bit more quickly. It's still pretty good though, because you still are pretty tanky and you still can get off a couple of rotations, maybe like 1 less rotation of spells while having more kill potential. Now, Lethality I think is kind of the most for fun kind of build, because basically you go in with the combo, you one-shot someone, which is of course really, really fun to play. But in reality, you are playing more of an assassin than a Jarvan, right? Than a ganking utility jungler, right? Because Jarvan typically is going to be semi-tanky, and he's going to provide a lot of utility and a lot of CC with his spells, right? But if you go for full Lethality, as I said, it's really fun to play, because I played a couple times before with First Strike, with full Lethality. But at that point, you kind of might as well be playing an assassin. Of course, if you're a good Jarvan player, you can of course pull off the Lethality Jarvan pretty easily, because basically you play Jarvan the same, just that you need to take note that you're not tanky. You go in for one combo, one-shot someone, or not one-shot someone, and you gotta run away, right? You can't be standing inside tanking, right? So yeah, so essentially that's kind of the 3 builds comparison. Like if we play Jarvan more, we might be able to show the rest of the builds in videos, but I wouldn't count on it, because as I said, this is pretty much the first Jarvan video I've made. If it's not the first, it's gonna be like the second or something, right? And the first was probably like 3-4 years ago or whatnot, because I don't remember making a Jarvan video ever. But I do actually play a lot of Jarvan jungle. Now, I think one of the reasons why is because I think Jarvan is a champion that maybe I'm just not very good at, but I normally don't really get S or A on him, even though I feel I play him quite well. So maybe there's just a lot of better Jarvan players. Even in this match that I'm showing you guys, it's not an S or A performance, but I do think I played the match pretty well, and I do think it's finally time to make a Jarvan video and kind of showcase what Jarvan can do and why I like playing him so much. So here, unfortunately, Masti secures the dragon. Now, if I EQ'd in immediately, I could have actually stolen it, but of course, to EQ in blind doesn't really make sense. You kind of got to use the flag for vision first, which is what I did there, but by the time I realized that it was in steal range, it was a little bit too late. So here we got a flank position onto the Samira as well as the Thresh. Now, Samira dashes out of the Cataclysm, but she has nowhere to run, and we're able to finish her off. Baron is now up, so any death is really important for either side. Akali gets caught here by Morgana. I'm trying to follow up, and Akali here deals a lot of damage to me, but I pop the gargoyles, survive the damage, and Akali actually dies. A flash, kind of wasted there because I thought she wouldn't die, but I think she dies to ignite or something like that. Volibear now on the chase for me. I'm running away at the 1 HP, waiting for Grievous Wounds to fall off so I can grab this fruit and maybe go back in for one more EQ. Now, the thing about playing a frontline engaged champion like Jarvan is, unlike an ADC when you're low, you can kind of just run away, but if you're the frontline engaged champion, if you're low, you can always get off like one more combo and probably survive, things like that. So you kind of always need to be aware and not just run away with your tail between your legs when one more engage could change the entire complexity of the fight. Like that one knock-up on the Volibear, for example, might have been able to get him killed. If like 3 of my teammates just dogpile on him, which is very possible to do there. So, you know, that is really important to take note of, the mindset shift from, you know, playing different champions. So here, Baron is up, and I secure the red buff, and everyone's kind of around the Baron area. So I don't want to be in that general vicinity, so the enemy team cannot just rush the Baron for free, right? So Volibear is going pretty deep into our jungle. I'm just trying to walk after him and just do a little bit of damage. Akali in the back line, flanking. Set CCs her. Meanwhile, I'm going in basically 1v4, distracting like 4 members by myself. And here is the point where I basically die. However, while that was happening, Akali died to my team, and I pretty much distracted 4 people of the enemy team. Sometimes as the, again, frontline tank engage, sometimes you gotta be the one to distract the enemy team. However, when you're the jungler, the situation kind of complicates a little bit, because in this case, the Baron is now up, and the enemy team is now going for the Baron, right? And my team is struggling to stop them from doing the Baron. So maybe as the jungler, sometimes you don't want to do that. Of course, it's very, very situational as to what's the right thing to do and when. But I thought that we could win the fight because they used all their cooldowns on us, and I thought my team could kill them all. But that's clearly not the case, and it becomes a very kind of even fight. And in fact, my teammates are still dying. Now here, the enemy team is very overextended, very, like, just over chasing here. I'm able to get 2 kills on the back end, killing Volibear as well as Thresh, who are way over chasing. Like, they literally killed me, stayed around for so long, fought, got Baron, fought more, and to the point that I revived and killed them. That's how long they were staying. Now here I'm just trying to defend my mid tower, waiting for my cooldowns. Like so. And now we reset and get Twin Guard, right? So in this case, you see I go for the standard build of Zeke's and Twin Guard as my first 2 tank items. So there isn't really a lot of attack speed champions in this game. No Yasuo, Yone, Tryndamere, or even the ADC Samira is not really an attack speed champion. It's really only Master Yi who's kind of the attack speed champion. So I don't rush a Frozen Heart. In this game, I just go for the standard build. And Akali is really fed, right? So I do still want to get that Force of Nature. Actually, technically, Akali isn't actually very fed, right? I'm way more fed than her, but she does a lot of damage to me, which basically just means that I need to go for that magic resist, right? There's no 2 ways about it, right? We gotta get that magic resist so that we don't just die to her. So here, a lot of Baron minions just piling in. We're trying to defend. Somehow we lose no inhibs. So that's not somehow, because that's the first Baron, but we lose no inhibs, which is a very big deal. We don't lose any inhibs, which means that there's no like huge pressure coming from the super minions or things like that. Now, enemy team is on soul point, so we want to deny the Ocean Soul if we can, but it's not worth dying over. So let's see if we can do anything about it. We're checking over the wall. We're going in, ulti, get the steal, and then Rek popping the gargoyles, flash over the wall just to escape. And we do get the steal, and Samira comes over the wall by herself. We are going to get rid of her. Thresh hooks me, but doesn't really have, no one really can follow up over the wall. Thresh dies, and this ends up not just being a steal, but it ends up being a very, very good fight. So, yeah, like I said, Jarvan very good at stealing. Like, his ult does a pretty good amount of burst damage, so with the ult into the smite, you can, get some stealing done, which is exactly what we do here. Now, you can see we are constantly going into the enemy jungle when we have the tempo to just check if there's camps. But we've been a little bit unlucky in the sense that there have been no camps. Now, unlucky is just one way to put it, but it's really because, of course, Master Yi has been farming his camps really well. Now, speaking of Master Yi, he's going in 1v4. Now, it's 2v4 with the Volibear coming here. So I try to trap Master Yi inside the Cataclysm, which does get him killed. However, he does do a decent amount of damage to my team, killing myself, as well as, I believe it was Morgana. I'm not sure, but anyways, basically, multiple people die to him, and overall it's a 2-for-3 trade, which is not very good because we end up having 3 members down for the 2 members on the enemy team, and Baron is now coming up in 30 seconds. Good news is that I'll be up 10 seconds before Baron, so I can just rush over to the Baron if need be. And you can see that in this game, I decided to go for the Bramble Vest because there's not, there is a decent amount of healing on the enemy team with the Master Yi, with the Bloodthirster, with Volibear, with Samira, so there's a lot of healing. I'm thinking, what, anti-heal is something that I really, really need to go for right here, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Right now, you could argue that basically my whole team except set already as anti-heal, so maybe it's not very necessary, but I decided to go for the Bramble Vest anyway because I expect to be the first one to engage and I expect to be focused first, so I can apply the anti-heal very, very easily. Now, Baron is up, and Elder is, 2 minutes away from spawning, so the only objective that matters right now is Baron. You can see all of us are at the Baron area. Now, I'm not sure why someone turned on to go for Akali, but this gives the enemy team the green light to start Baron. Now, I'm just trying to find a way into the fight, because this is a very awkward fight. I don't want to engage onto the Thresh, right? That's kind of a waste. Right, so here I end up going in onto the Master Yi, who's the jungler, who's the important target. Samira dies as well. Thresh goes in with the hook onto the Morgana, goes into basically a 1v3. Now everyone on his team is finally caught up. Akali goes onto me. I slow smite the Akali, I'm running away. Morgana gives me the black shield, and overall we are running away. It's overall a 2-for-2 trade though, so it's not a horrible fight, right? Even though we're the ones that are running away, it's not like we lost the fight, we did pretty well. We got rid of Samira and Master Yi, 2 of the bigger threats on the enemy team. Probably Volibear is a very big problem because he's a little bit too tanky and we can't really kill him. And also Akali, of course, is a problem to me, which also means she's a problem to my carries, right? Because if she can kill me, she can definitely kill the carries. So here Volibear is alone, so I'm going in on him because he's literally alone, right? So unfortunately that his team is now coming, so I'm still just tanking his damage. And here I ult, trapping Akali and Volibear inside, allowing Senna to hit an amazing ult, killing both of them. So now we're thinking it's a Baron angle, because now we have 2 other members of the enemy team dead. So of course Jungler is alive and Samira is alive, but they're going to have to come contest the Baron if they want to try to steal it. There is a control ward inside. I'm going to quickly EQ Smite. Not the best way to secure, but we don't have ult, and that's all we can really do. So now with Baron, we're going to get the minion wave advantage with all the minions pushing in. We're going to go over to Elder. And of course, Elder fight is very, very important. Of course, 2 members on any team are still dead. So you can see that if you die at the wrong time, it can be disastrous for your team. Because now they're going 3v5 against us. Now they're coming in to try to contest slowly but surely. But we secure the Elder, and that means we can flash over, ult, trapping Master Yi and Thresh inside. I'm not sure why Master Yi took 1 eternity to flash out, but he chooses not to flash out immediately. As a result, ends up dying. Thresh dies as well. Now, Akali and Volibear have now respawned, but with Baron Elder, it's going to be very hard for them to defend. Set with the 2-man grab. Volibear was tanky, but is no longer because he's facing down the barrel of a Elder buff. Akali pops the Shroud, walks away out of her base. She's not really going to be able to do anything. Samira tries to get something done. I'm now tanking the tower while my team is killing the enemies, and we are able to get the win. So I think it's a pretty good Jarvan game just to showcase what you can do. But with that, I'm going to leave you guys with the stats as usual. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.